The surviving daughters of Edward III. Joan. Joan was born sometime around 1333 or 1334, mostly around December or January. Joan was also known as Joanna, and she was born in the Tower of London. When she was young, she was placed in the care of Marie de St. Paul, wife of Emir de Valence and founderess of Pembroke College, Cambridge. She grew up with two of her siblings and her cousin. In 1336, Joan was betrothed to the eldest son of Otto, Duke of Austria, with the stipulation that she would receive her education at the Austrian court. However, Edward III showed reluctance in sending her and delayed her departure, promising that he would personally accompany her the following year. In 1334, Joan accompanied her father on his campaign to Antwerp. Later, they travelled to Kolzeb, where they met Louis IV, Holy Roman Emperor, and were special guests at the Imperial Diet in the Church of St. Castor. Joan was finally at the Austrian court in the autumn of 1539. Around this time, Duke Otto passed away, and Edward sensed that the new Duke of Austria was swayed towards France. In the end, Edward decided to dissolve the marriage agreement and instead, on Joan's return home in 1340, Joan was betrothed again in 1345 to Peter of Castile. In the summer of 1348, she left England of the permission of her parents. At the time, she was most likely the most protected woman in Europe. As the young 14-year-old travelled on her journey, the Black Death had not yet happened in England, and it is unlikely the party was aware of the danger, despite the severe outbreak of plague in Bordeaux. At first, it did not occur to Joan, and advisors told her to leave town. Soon as they watched in horror as the members of the Encourage began falling sick and dying. Poor Joan feared for her life and was probably moved to the small village of Lourmault, where she remained for time. However, she could not escape the disease, and it became its first victim in the camp, suffering a violent time. Sadly, Joan died on the 2nd of September 1348. Some accounts document that Joan was buried in Branon Cathedral, and her statue in Westminster Abbey is on the south side of her father's tomb. Mary. Mary was born at Bishop's Waltham Palace, Hampshire, on the 10th of October 1344. Her future husband was already living with her brothers and sisters in the royal nursery. This was as a result of her father's moves to create alliances in support of his renewed claim to the French throne. When Mary was older, she was married to John at Woodstock Palace around the 3rd of July 1361. No records survive of the wedding except the accounts of the wedding dress created by her tailor, John Avery. The marriage didn't last long because she died the 13th of September 1361. She was only 16. Isabella. Isabella was born on the 16th of June 1332. She was named after her grandmother, Isabella of France. It was most likely she was her father's favourite child, but she was less closer with her mother, Philippa. She was doting to her parents. She slept in a gilded cradle lined with a taffeta and covered with a fur blanket. Her gowns were imported Italian silk, but with jewels and fur lined. Isabella, along with her siblings, had a household of servants which included a personal chaplain, musicians, a noble governor and governesses, and 3 ladies in waiting, as well as a staff of grooms, equires, clerks, butlers, cooks, and other attendants. She grew up with her sister Joan and Edward. Isabella married Eginhard VII, Lord of County. The couple had 2 children together, Philippa and Marie. Isabella lived all the way to the age of 50, dying in 1382 on the 5th of October. Margaret. There is not much known about Margaret, but she was betrothed to Albert III of Austria, but this changed due to politics at the time. In the end, she married John Hastings, 2nd Earl of Pembroke. Sadly, Margaret died very young, and she was buried in Abingdon Abbey. The exact date and cause of her death is unknown. She was last mentioned as living on the 1st of October 1361.